Hi, welcome to Punchline Talks, the business breakfast briefers. I'm Mark Owen, and each week I invite a panel of business experts to review the morning newspapers, find out what's happened in their own individual business and their own individual business sectors, and finally, what's caught their eye in this week's Punchline. But before I introduce my guests, let's just quickly thank our fantastic sponsors, Hazelwood's Accountants and Business Advisors, and we couldn't do the show without them. Okay, let's introduce the panel. Today we've got Alistair Cunningham OBE. He is the Chief Executive of Tewkesbury Borough Council. He's responsible for a budget of £13 million, 220 staff serving a population of 98,000. He's been in post around 18 months, so we'll find out all about what's going on in Tewkesbury Borough Council. We have Amanda Toner, co-owner and inspirational officer of Incento Group, which holds the franchise in Gloucestershire for McDonald's. She has 1,100 staff across 8 restaurants, a turnover of approximately 41 million, and she's just come back from Barcelona McDonald's conference, so we'll find out all about that and the future of McDonald's. We have Peter Mars. He's the MD of Forge Motorsport UK and Forge Engineering. He's got 54 staff based in Bristol Road, Gloucester Factory, 5 in USA, 5 in Taiwan, turnover of 5.5 million. And we're going to find out all about the manufacturing, what's going on in his business. And finally, last not least, but my good friend, Mark Hurrell. He's the ex-editor, MD, producer, TV presenter, BBC Radio Gloucestershire, big man. I should say big man. I lost my. I was bigging you up so much there, Mark. He's just been appointed and elected as the High Sheriff of Gloucestershire. So we nod. I was hoping you'd turn up all dressed up. I did ask him, by the way, to dress up with his sword, but he's having none of it. He's too professional. Okay, before we start, let's just share that and have a look at the newspapers, courtesy of the BBC. Okay, the Daily Express. PM tells sick note Britain, get a grip and a job. The Daily Telegraph. PM vows to end sick note culture. The Times. Sunak vows crack down on culture of sick note. You can tell there's a theme going on here. The Eye. Brexit travel hope for UK students as EU offers olive branch to Labour. The Financial Times. Post-Brexit border checks would not be turned on when safety rules change, says the Financial Times. The Guardian. Let's have a look. The one that's caught my eye here is Sturgeon's husband charged in SNP inquiry. The Daily Mirror. I warned the Tories about him 3 months ago. It's about Tory MP there. And the Daily Star. Rest in peace. The full breakfast. I don't know about you and me, but I still like a full English breakfast every now and then. You can obviously tell. Anyway, okay, let's start with the show. I'm going to start with you this morning, Alistair. Thanks for joining us. Okay, what have you picked out from the papers, please, sir?
Well, a couple. I got one from the Daily Mirror, which is about crime screens, it's called, which is snappy. It's really about the access children have to smartphones and saying that a third of 3 to 7 year olds are actually using social media. And of course, that figure goes up to 60% of sort of 7 to 11 year olds, then 90%. And I think the issue is it's just an unregulated access now, and you've got the Children's Commissioner Rachel D'Souza saying this is a dangerous place. You've got the NSPCC saying dangerous place. On the other side, you've got the media companies saying, well, of course we're trying to control it, but it does seem to be the Wild West out there, and I think it's that real concern that until such time there's proper controls in place, so parents can fundamentally limit what children have access to. It's the ability for children to find content they really shouldn't be seeing at any age. And there's a lot in here about the damage it's doing to childhood and how people grow up. And it is that thing, we're almost testing out this new social media tool on young children to see what the impact's going to be, which the lack of regulation is there. Now government are doing things, of course, but we all know how clever our children are. I've got children in their 30s and I've got a 2 and a 4 year old. Don't ask, Mark. But the level of knowledge that they have, and in terms of technology, outstrips adults. So they're saying 40% of young children are using fake ID to actually access the online world. So it is just, we'll look back and realise potentially the damage we've done to a whole generation because the controls weren't there.
Totally agree. It's a wild west out there. They have no control of it, and of course, self-regulation doesn't work. We all know that. Yeah. So totally agree with you there, Alistair. Have you got any other stories for us as well?
I've got one that's probably more important. Is the I think you covered it. I've picked it up from the Times. The fry up is toast for the day's young. Now that really struck a chord with me. I do like a good fry up. I live just outside Frome, which is sort of smashed avocado central. It makes Stroud look, sort of. It is the Somerset Stroud. So, they were saying sort of 3/4 of all greasy spoon cafes have gone. And people, especially young people, are just moving away from fried breakfast now. You could argue that a big fry up has about 1,700 calories in it, which is 2/3 your daily calorie allowance. And if you're not out digging roads or mining, probably you don't need that level of calories. But it is this move away, and it's not just veganism. It's that sense of people just finding that level of fat and calorie intake to be unacceptable in today's modern world, which you can't deny when you see those sort of figures, that it probably isn't the best thing to start your day
Look,
with.
there's
I may have to jump in and say something different.
I'm going to say, look, you got your head on McDonald's here from Gloucestershire. Everyone's having a Big Mac breakfast, aren't they, Amanda?
I think what's interesting is, I think the difference here is potentially it's the fry up. It's, you mentioned, Alistair, the on the plate, the greasy spoons, because obviously as McDonald's we see that our breakfast sales are rising, and the sales of the breakfast wrap, which are essentially everything you talked about, just put in a wrap and rolled up. It's like the Billy Connolly sketch, isn't it? Everything's kind of the same, but just folded in a different way. We don't see that. We see a lot of people coming in for that, but it's how they expect it to be delivered, I think, is slightly different. So people are coming in it's more about coming in for eggs, maybe eating it on the go in a sandwich as opposed to on a plate. I don't think the love of breakfast has gone, but I think you're very right. The kind of greasy spoon image, or cafes that do that kind of thing, have kind of petered out. I love a fried breakfast on a plate. But I would say our breakfast sales, there are plenty of people that I can see are ordering full English, just tend to be wrapped up in a different way. So maybe it's presentation.
Okay, well, let's quickly go around the panel to see who still likes a full fried breakfast. Maybe we're of a particular age. Mark, quickly, yes or no?
Yes, but what I was going to add to what Amanda was saying is that actually there's so much more choice available now, and I think it's very encouraging that I'm sure McDonald's do this and other cafes do as well, where you can buy a pot of porridge if you want. There's much more choice out there for us breakfast eaters. I think the important thing here actually is that people eat a breakfast, particularly kids who go to school who don't have a meal at home. So yeah, definitely yes for a full fry up on occasions as a treat. But for me, it's porridge and all that sort of stuff.
It's a full fry, yes or no, sir?
Was that me? Sorry, yeah. Well, I've been on a heavy keto diet, so just lost over 2.5 stone. So eggs, bacon, sausage, no beans, too many carbs, no ash brain, too many carbs. It's a big thumbs up for me. And I shall go and get bacon and eggs right after this.
It's funny, actually. I thought you'd lost a little bit of weight, if you don't mind me saying. But anyway, let's move on. Let's go to flip back over to Amanda. Amanda, what have you picked up from the papers, please?
Well, we said this morning, you said about the crackdown on the culture of sick notes, and it's reported in various different ways, isn't it, by different papers. So whether it's sensationalised or not, we've got the Sunak cracks down on the culture. And I think that the word here is it's careful how it's reported. So it can be easily sensationalised that everyone's phoning in sick and this not get back to work Britain. I don't think that's the case. I think it comes back to we just got to be careful we don't medicalise something which is part of life. And I think this is sometimes what you see, that what I've noticed is people often say, instead of saying they're anxious, they have anxiety. And that's quite a different concept when you hear them reported. And I feel our culture has kind of led people sometimes to potentially have things that could just have to be dealt with. Getting people back to work if they're well, and mixing with other people and being in a social environment is so important. And this is something that I think we have an option to get involved in.
Do you think that people are over mindfulness in a way? They're almost overthinking the brain in a way, you know, because you feel anxious, that doesn't mean you're ill.
Well, I don't know if that comes back to, again, the comment that was made earlier by Alistair about screen usage and people just having their own thoughts with the screen. I do know that when we have a lot of young people, obviously our business is 70% of people are, you know, under 23. And they are, you see, are very much judging the, you know, the changes in society. And they love coming into work and being part of a team, and very much see that on the shop floor, not having phones, working together. It really encourages people. So I see, obviously, if people are ill, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about people having real mental health issues. But I think there's another piece to encourage people to be part of something. And that could be work, or it could be something social. So it's just the differentiation. I think it's great that people are looking at it, stepping back and saying, is this, are we just prescribing, or do we need to do something different? And I think that's the message. Can we do this a different way?
And also, the country can't afford it, Amanda. It's quite simple as that. Thanks so much
Or
for that.
businesses.
I'm going to, yeah, all businesses. You're dead right there. But we'll come to Peter about his business later. Mark, just go over to you, please. What have you picked out from the papers, please?
Well, the problem is, as you know, Mark, with news, is it develops all the time. And we have a breaking news story today where we could potentially be looking yet another escalation in the Middle East, which I don't think we need to talk about here. But I mean, I think that is extremely concerning for all of us. But on a, I think, quite an important note, actually, there is plenty of great stories out there today. The one I've actually picked out concerns young people and Europe. Without being too political, I mean, what a disaster Brexit was, and what a great shame that actually young people have been prevented from studying and working in Europe. And when I left school, I actually had a year in France at a university there, which was extremely formative and led me into broadcasting, actually, but that will take a long time to explain. But what's been suggested here now is the European Commission is saying that there would be scope to allow young people under 30 to work and study in Europe, or volunteer, in fact, which is something that I'm particularly interested in. And I think that must be good news. And it also would enable Europeans to come across here and do similar things in this country. So, you know, I'm all in favor of that. And I think that the more our young people can go and experience a different culture, it must be good. And they bring things back. They bring language back, particularly language. How many of us are embarrassed when we go abroad, when, you know, you splutter a few words in Spanish or Italian, when you get that response in perfect English, you know. So, you know, I'm all in favor. You'll tell my position. You know, I'm very keen on Europe. Before Brexit, I regarded myself as a European, living on a small island on the western periphery. But I think we should encourage this sort of thing to enable people to move across the channel as easily as possible, and it will help with work. I mean, you know, Amanda's restaurants, I'm sure, would benefit enormously from part-time European workers. But you know, plenty of other things.
I couldn't agree with you more there, Mark. No, it's a big story in the front of the papers today. So thanks ever so much for that. Let's go over to you now, Peter. What have you picked out from the papers, please?
I said you guys on the introduction, I think it's a little bit probably environmental. So I got a little bit of about the water companies. I live 5 miles from the Severn. The amount of effluent that's been pumped into it is particularly relevant at the moment, as the guys are out albering, trying to make sure that the eel population stays up within the Severn. And the guy within this article is saying almost they're painting themselves as you know, for us, we're doing our best. I fundamentally have a problem with the huge salaries that are awarded to these CEOs in several million, and I find, without wishing to be too political, the hypocrisy just blows me away. I'm lucky enough to have a friend who works quite high up in within the government and the Environment Agency, and says, you know, we've got 60 years plus of no investment in our waterways, and even if we change our government, he sees nothing changing. In fact, he's about to probably to retire because he feels he can no longer influence the effluence. So that's it really does disappoint me, that.
I couldn't agree with you more, Peter. It makes my absolute blood boil. As someone like yourself, runs their own business, me and Amanda as well, then, it just really gets you going, isn't it? They make so much money. It's so much greed, and they're pumping all our sewage into the sea. They're pumping it into our rivers. I met Ed Davey not very long ago, who's come to Cheltenham now, the River Cheltenham, and he stood in there, and it's something that Liberal Democrats feel very strongly about. I don't want to get into politics, but part of their manifesto. But you are right. I don't think they can do anything about it, but they need to desperately. And what's your other story, please?
Again, a little bit. I'll have to do a little bit of research on it. It would be the cloud seeding with this being sort of accused of being done within Dubai. Talk about the floods in the UK. I've never seen a plane. Not sure if you've seen the clip on social media of the plane trying to take off in probably 4 foot of water on the runway. And just looking into the sort of sound like some kind of sort of green flag waiver, which I am somewhat, but just chemtrails and cloud seeding. It sort of I dived into down a wormhole that took me an hour's worth of conspiracy theories maybe, but is it? And then just the amount of rain that came in Dubai would probably lead you to think that there's something going on. But yeah, just sort of crazy with the amount of water that came down in a desert.
Didn't they say they pumped something into the sky or something?
Yeah, there's something. Go on. Sorry, Amanda, carry on.
I was in Dubai earlier this year, and we've been to Dubai a number of times, and they do this. So they shoot missiles, I understand it, missiles or something, into the atmosphere to promote this sort of aggregation of clouds and what have you, to get some rainfall. And when we were there this year, there was rainfall a couple of times, and a little bit, but nothing that I've really experienced before. But I've saw those videos as well, and they just won't know how to cope. I mean, what was it? A year's worth of rainfall fell in 24 hours, and you think these lands are deserts. But again, as you go back, I suppose this is what happens when you try and play
God.
Play God.
Yes.
Okay, right. Well, thanks ever so much for those great stories, everybody. We'll move on to our other sections now. Let's go back over to you, Alistair, please, and talk about your work there at Tewkesbury Borough Council. Obviously, there's lots and lots going on. What has been the biggest difference, say, coming over from Wiltshire Council and discovering Tewkesbury?
Probably the scale. Wiltshire was a big unitary authority. I think we're the 6th biggest, and it's interesting because you think that would be a harder job, but actually coming to a smaller authority where you haven't got all those teams of people to do the things you want done, that direct contact with our communities, that direct contact with issues, and has been quite incredible. And I think a couple of the hardest things, just touching on a couple of stories being picked up, the flooding we've had this year. Flooding is something Tewkesbury is associated with. You see those lovely pictures of the Abbey with the which is fine when it stays in the floodplain, but after Christmas we had 220 homes inundated with flood water, and nearly every weekend, bar a couple, we've had to stand the teams up and get people out because of the changing patterns of rainfall in this country. So we are looking at a situation where flooding is becoming a normal experience, I think, for significant portions of the year. And that just wasn't where we were 10, 15, 20 years ago. So that's been quite shocking, but also watching how the teams stand up and just go out of the weekend and do work, and it's voluntary in effect. So that's quite a significant difference. The other one, I think, is the Garden Communities, Garden Town program, which, again, for an authority the size of Tewkesbury, because we are one of the smallest, I think, in the country, it's a huge undertaking which the council's pushing forward. And actually now the developers are on board. We're looking at higher quality development, creating places rather than just these potentially sterile housing developments you get. And there's a real inertia behind it now, with applications starting to come forward.
Can I just bring you back to that, Alistair? Because
of course.
The panel and some of the people watching this might not know anything about the Garden Town program. Obviously, I know a bit about it. Can you just briefly explain what it is and how big a site this is?
Sure. This is a different approach to development. So rather than just bolting on housing growth on existing settlements, just say, let's start from scratch. Let's create a new town and put all the infrastructure in, and also look at making sure that people walk to work, cycle to work. The infrastructure's there, the integration of green space. So more than half of the whole site will be open space. So it's really trying a different approach. And of course, the development industry need to be on board. For the local communities, there are concerns because there's small villages all around there, and they just see a significant proportion of housing, and there's going to be implications in terms of Junction 9, the traffic and things like that. So it's one of those it's almost a generational piece of work, because building out 10,000 homes initially, when you're going to be talking 10, 15, 20 years for this, but it's a different approach. And whilst it's had its teething troubles, we've got some very good developers working with us now, and I think people will be surprised what you can actually deliver if everyone's on board. So yeah, but I won't be around to see it build out.
No, fantastic. Thanks ever so much for explaining that. I'm really excited about
jump in here.
actually. Yeah, of course you can,
Mark,
Mark.
do you mind if I just jump in and ask the bleedingly obvious question? Where is this place? Is this Ashchurch in that area? Where exactly is this new village coming?
This is Ashchurch, and we've moved away from what was initially a garden town principle to say it's going to be garden communities. So we're looking at local centres set in their own surrounding. And I think that lends itself better to the Tewkesbury area rather than a very large new settlement. So a lot of it's going to be north of the A46, and then over time it will start moving south. But as I say, it's a long-term project.
No, absolutely massive as well. No, thanks ever so much for that, Mark. Good point. Okay, let's go back over to you, Amanda, then, please. You've just come back from Barcelona. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. A big McDonald's conference. Could you tell us all about it, please?
Yeah, I can. So every 2 years, McDonald's hold their worldwide conference, and they invite franchisees from all over the world because, as you know, they've got them from very far-flung places. And this is the first one they've had that hasn't been in North America. So typically they've got to have a big venue, obviously, because there's about 14,000 people who go there. So they've got to pick a conference centre that can accommodate that kind of people. But it was quite a big difference for them, I think, to do that. And what was interesting was there wasn't as many attendees from North America, which you could understand, but they actually had more franchisees there. So we had a bigger attendance, and I guess that shows the inclusivity, the global reach, the inviting people in, and it felt it was good to have in a different city. So we've been to a few in the North America, but we had everyone from China, from the Philippines, from India, from Spain. Obviously, Spain were very proud. We had a real theme of flamenco dancing, which was some fantastic stuff. But no, it was very inspirational. But there was a very big message, and that message absolutely was digital, which is coming back to what we were talking about earlier.
Okay, let's talk about that then. So how does McDonald's embrace the digital? Is it AI? Is it delivery? Is it home delivery?
I think there's a combination of things. And what's interesting is when we talked earlier on about there's the political piece about people using their phones, and they talk about the next generation as there's Gen Z, and then it's going to be Gen Alpha, and they're called Generation Glass, because, as we mentioned before, they've all been brought up with a phone or an iPhone or something like that. And I guess it's not our job to police that. That's the social world's job to sort that out. But it is there, and we are going to have to learn to work with this in a different way. And as we said, how we're going to manage these controls is important. But it was about embracing the culture, and instead of always seeing it as the bad thing, how we can work with young people whose attitudes are different to things to collaborate. There was some of my stories later on are about collaboration, about bringing people in and how they can work together. So instead of it just being, we're a business and this is how we do things, and putting an advert out old style on TVs, which, by the way, no one who's young watches TV, they all watch their old channels, how we can get them to work with us to give their message, get their stories across, and a lot of that was community. A lot of that was about how they're helping doing volunteering things and just being a more collaborative approach. It was really interesting. Yeah, but AI was in there. AI was obviously in there, and lots of stuff like that, and working with the tech brands.
Okay, just very quickly, very quickly, you got the new chicken promotion coming out. How big a piece is that when it got a new promotion of that? What's the uptick on business?
There is an uptick in
second.
this. So people want to try new things, and people like new. So it's good to have something on the table that they can try something different. But our core menu is what keeps us going. It's the new that adds the extra bits on. It brings new customers coming back in. But yes, it always does well. There's always a rise.
As our doorbell went at sort of 10:30 the other night, and I said to my daughter, "What the hell's that?" Thinking her boyfriend had arrived, but it wasn't. It was McDonald's. What can you say?
Boyfriend.
From your restaurant, I was thinking, my goodness. Anyway, right. Thanks ever so much for that, Amanda. We're going to go over to you, Mark. Right. You've just been elected, and because you're not appointed, you're elected the High Sheriff of Gloucestershire. Congratulations, mate. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, John,
fantastic honour.
Sorry, I'm going to start from the beginning. What is the High Sheriff of Gloucestershire? Tell us a little bit about it. You've got 2 minutes, mate.
Okay. Well, the first thing to tell you is that basically a group of people put names forward to the Privy Council in London. The Privy Council is the King's Council of officers and support, and advisors. And the thing about the High Sheriff, it's been going for over 1,000 years. It started before 1066. It's an honorary role. It's only for a year. It's there's no money involved, and if you do anything, you have to pay for it out of your own pocket. So I was going to say fancy dress, but it's not fancy dress. The very smart velvet uniform that one has to wear, I've actually borrowed from somebody, but which is great because they cost a fortune to wear. Court dress, 18th century court dress. I mean, in principle, how it works is that the High Sheriff is responsible to the King, and I have a warrant from him in the house, which says I'm responsible for the emergency services, the judiciary, and basically volunteers. So in the old days, the Shire Reeve, which is when it started in 959, I think the first High Sheriff, basically you're responsible for collecting taxes and maintaining law and order. And the problem for High Sheriffs is that there's only one sheriff that we all know about. He's from Nottingham, and he gets a bit of a bad press. So sheriffs were enforcers in a way, but nowadays it's totally all those things that the High Sheriff used to do are now done by statutory bodies, as they should be. So it's a voluntary role. It's completely how can I say, you're there to endorse things. So my brief, and there's no job description. There's nobody sitting on my shoulder saying, "Oh, you need to do this, you need to do that." I don't have a boss. I can do what I like, basically, within the parameters of being High Sheriff. So I shall be working with the police, and it's the old county as well, which makes it slightly complicated. So I've got responsibilities in South Gloucestershire. So I'm very keen. My first engagement, in fact, I've got 2 next week. One is turning out at the St George's Day parade, which is an obvious thing for the High Sheriff to attend, and secondly is a passing out parade for Gloucestershire PCSOs. So it's people like that, and the cadets, police cadets, PCSOs, unwaged people. There are 160,000 volunteers in Gloucestershire, over 3,000 charities, I believe. There are thousands of people out there, and you guys all know about this, doing stuff for free. And if I can say thank you and well done, that's the least I can do, frankly. So
it's thank you and well done from the King, isn't it?
It is directly, yes. I mean, where it gets slightly complicated is people get confused between the Lord Lieutenant, Edward Gillespie. I'm also a deputy lieutenant. He has 30 deputies. So he looks after specifically the royal family. And the High Sheriff, who's not quite the senior, the Lord Lieutenant is the senior party, but the High Sheriff looks after those, as I say, the emergency services, judiciary. So all the magistrates, 140 magistrates in Gloucestershire, all volunteers. 95% of law enforcement, the courts deal, 95% of court work is done by volunteers. Who knew that? And you only get to hear about the big stuff when it goes to the Crown Court in Gloucester. So there are an awful lot of unsung heroes, and it gets to be great. Very excited.
Well, I couldn't think of a better person to do the job, Mark. And
I could.
Thank
you anyway.
And I just want to say one thing that Mark hasn't mentioned is actually a 5-year waiting, kind of a 5-year roster, isn't it? That you sit on as well. Okay, thanks ever so much for that. I'm going to go back over to Peter. Pete, thanks for joining us today. Can you tell us about Ford Motor Group, please?
Yeah, so we're 35-year family business, Forge Engineering, Forge Motorsport. We make a range of aftermarket products. This is probably the alternative to the environmental. We actually make parts to make cars go faster. There is a social aspect to that where we're not trying to increase sort of pollution, but our parts are what I would call a luxury item. They're absolutely not necessary. It's something that you're going to want to buy to enhance your vehicle. The engineering side, we're sort of supporting local business, MOD. We used to do an awful lot of work for Birds Eye Walls in the day, which is now Unilever. And for us within Gloucestershire and with a lot of our sort of business contacts and colleagues, it's pretty tough out there right now. I think we're seeing a huge increase in obviously heating bills for people with domestic heating. I went shopping with my wife the other day, and I was absolutely astounded how much the price of a jar of coffee and a large block of cheese was. And when you realise that folk have got to go out and sort of, feed their families, put fuel in their car, I can understand why our sort of aftermarket motorsport products are way down their list. And I think it's a case of us tightening our belts, making sure we keep all our good people that work with us in jobs, and my sort of chat to the guys are we'll ride this out because we have no alternative but to batten down the hatches and keep going.
Peter, what sort of downturn are you seeing? I know your turnover is down from what we spoke about, but it's sales really a lot, being hit hard.
Yeah, we made a large six-figure loss at the end of last year. But as much as you're happy to celebrate the good times, I think it's important we be on programs, podcasts like this where we sort of share it in brutal honesty. So yeah, large six-figure loss in the UK and an even larger loss within the US office, which just means we're sort of restructuring, reorganization. We're down at least 20%. We've increased our prices, which is a difficult thing to do when you're in a competitive market. So we're in the upper levels of our competitors. We've reduced some of our dealer discount, which is clawing back some margin. But we've got to try and be a little bit more innovative, which leads us back to sort of supporting the engineering. So we're just precision engineers, really. CNC machining. We make a range of product parts for our automotive aftermarket. As I said, we make a range of parts for contracting, and we're seeing a greater need to sort of diversify back to that. Within our motorsport business, we're also, whereas it was always about our brand, always about Forge Motorsport per se, we're now turning the expertise that we have to support leading European car manufacturers and modifiers within their own private label, which we've not really needed to do before because we were too busy with our own product range. So that's been quite interesting, sort of supporting OEM or private labeling using our, and we've got some fantastic people working with us, engineers, designers, fabricators, welders. So that diversification has been quite interesting, and also the upskilling of our guys. The word I would probably use is a little bit institutionalized into the product range that we make, but then seeing the way they've grown as engineers and people working for the MOD has just been it's kind of like it's a bright light to see these guys growing whilst trying to make sure we keep the business going.
Yeah, and there's nothing like it. I love the sort of solid engineering side of things with lathes and stuff going away. It's nothing quite like it, and making things. We say in this country we don't make anything, but we do. Here in Gloucestershire, there's so many aviation companies. It's very exciting. We wrote a story the other day about OnTech moving forward as well. But hey, Pete, it sounds like you're really trying hard there to it's a very difficult marketplace, isn't it?
Yeah, it's tough. I think there needs to be an awareness. Well, there is an awareness as well, but we need to keep pushing the awareness within government, because I totally understand it. I'm very environmental today again, and the green issues in pollution and emissions. And I'm all for that, but within government, we need to understand there are millions and millions of people employed manufacturing parts within the aftermarket. And it's not so simple just to give a wide brushstroke to say, you know, you need to stop these modifications. They are they're bad for the environment. What it needs to be is, how do we make these modifications less impactful? So I think sometimes within sort of government, you can have a knee-jerk reaction. And luckily, we've got a really good sort of industry bodies called the PAAA, which is the Performance Aftermarket Association, something which lobby government to make sure they understand the implications. So yeah, it's tough, but we'll be there. You have no choice.
Thanks ever so much for that, Pete. And thanks ever so much for being so honest as well, especially on a show like this. It goes to show how difficult it is, and I hear these sorts of stories all the time. I'll be honest with you, all the time. It is bloody hard out there. Anyway, thanks ever so much for that. Okay, we're going to come into wrapping up the show, and we've run out a little bit of time, so I'm going to quickly go to the pick of the punchlines. I'm going to change the order. Mark, pick of the punchlines, please. We've only got a minute each.
Okay, right. Monday's future of farming, very important. You highlighted that at the Three County Show. Very important. The farming industry gets a look in and has a discussion. Wednesday, you talked about the future of Cavendish House. Call for it to be vibrant. It needs something. The actual one I've picked, though, was from Tuesday's edition, Mark, which was the sale of rare D-Day maps, the 80th anniversary of D-Day coming up in June. I have a feeling, somebody out there will know better than me, that some of the D-Day planning was actually done at Tewkesbury. So I think it's important that we remember the 6th of June, 1944.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks ever so much for that, Peter.
Can I just use my last 10 seconds to mention something else, which is a plug for Stroud Brewery, who today are launching the Earth Protector Ale in memory of Polly Higgins, who many people will know was a very well-known environmentalist in the Stroud Valleys, who sadly died at 50. And that's been launched today, 5 years ago. I never met her. I know her husband, and she has a fantastic reputation. So look out for the Earth Protector Ale in a pub in Stroud when you go. And let's support our pubs, please.
Okay, thanks ever so much for that, Mark. Right, I'm going to go back over to you, Peter. Okay, right. Picked out from the punchline, please.
Great segue there, Mark. So pub in Bourton on the Water. Drove through there last week. Fantastic little town. With the councils, forgive me, I understand they've got a fantastic job to do, but with businesses on their arses, I think we need to be doing something to support them. So they're asking them to take a sign down. Because it just blows my mind. We need to be getting people into pubs. The last thing I'd be worrying about is what a sign looks like. However, I do understand that it needs to fit within. There's also an engineering company in Barclay who's had a sign asked to be removed because it's too bright. Okay, so let's dim the lights, but let's keep the lights on in the engineering business because that's a struggle. And then it just brings me on down to the promenade where during COVID they put up fantastic little outside marquees. I use them to be able to keep their business open during COVID, and I read regularly that they want these taken down. All you're going to do is take business covers out of that restaurant, and I would just say keep the doors on, keep the lights on. Maybe we look at these regulations at a later date, but not now. There's so much stress within hospitality and in business in general. I think we just perhaps need a little bit more open-handed approach.
Yeah, it's just not the right time, is it? I couldn't agree more. Okay, Alistair, I'm going to go over to you. What have you picked out for punchline, please? Your pick of the punchline.
Just a couple. One was building on the engineering piece was Safran Electrical and Power with that announcement. They're developing a new electrical harness for hybrid and electric aircraft. Now, it's not a harness to wear. It's like wiring loom type harness, but that advanced aircraft manufacturing technology in our areas is quite significant. So it's really good to see manufacturing driving forward very well. The completely other end is the Cotswold Designer Outlet Company did a piece on, and the fact you've got a 300-acre site there, which is going to be one of the biggest outlet centres. Now, I must admit, when I came to Tewkesbury, I thought outlet centres were passe and it was all the internet, but this will be a destination with about 20 million people in its catchment area. And the trick for all of us in Gloucestershire is how can we get people to do a linked trip and go into the Cotswolds, go into the city, go into Tewkesbury and see something while they're here, rather than stay on site, go to the food and beverage on site and then get in their cars and drive home. So there's a huge investment and a lot of jobs, but it's what's the additional benefit that we can get that for the county.
I'm just going to add one other thing, Alistair, to that is as we deliver magazines out there, and I do it personally in Tewkesbury, by the way, going to every single shop along with my colleague, and they are very worried. The retailers in Tewkesbury Town Centre are very worried about the outlet. So I just thought I'd bring that over to you. We can't cover it now, but I'm going to have to go to Amanda because we're running
No
out.
problem.
Amanda, what have you picked out for this week's Punchline, please?
I'll be super quick. It's they're both from Thursday, but they're both continuing that theme of retail, but also collaboration. I thought it was really interesting that Holland and Barrett have decided to employ, train up women in their stores to speak to other women about hormones, women's health issues. They seem to have woken up to this curve that's been going on for the past 3 years. But I just thought it was quite innovative of them to say, do you know what, this is a safe space. You can come in, you can talk about things that women are obviously desperate to talk about. There's been a big talk about hormones and menopause and gynecological things. And I thought fair play to Holland and Barrett. And the other thing was the collaboration. This is coming back to get my visit with McDonald's about collaborating with different groups. The art students, John Lewis are saying, we are opening our doors. We'd like to have some students from Gloucestershire to bring in their art and display it and encourage a conversation. And these are things, going back to Alistair's point, that you can't see on the internet. So there's a reason to come into a city centre to talk to someone or to see something that you wouldn't necessarily have learned from just looking at a screen. And I thought that was quite innovative. And my final one was, I just guess, Mark, if you're not around on May the 18th or July the 13th, I'm assuming it's because you're going to the Forest of Dean's Naturist Day to check out what it's like to be a member. I saw that in the pages, and I thought, I'm sure that's if any of us message Mark on that day, I think we'll all know where he's at.
You all know where I'm going to be. Thanks. Couldn't think of anything worse. Thanks so much. My story, pick of the punchline, actually was my exclusive behind-the-scenes visit to the custody department of the police behind the police station. Absolutely fascinating, fantastic work that the ICVs do. They're looking for volunteers, and I just want to take my hat off to obviously the police themselves and all the fantastic work they do. And unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. I'd like to thank my fantastic panel today. Thank you ever so much for joining us. To all the viewers who are watching this today as well, and also to our brilliant sponsors, Hazelwood's Accountants and Business Advisors. And if you I forgot where I was going with this, but I just want to say, remember, it's all in the punchline. Bye.